Hey everybody, and welcome back to our videos about Node.js and building a server application. We're going to be continuing to build it in NestJS, and we're going to add GraphQL today. And so if you're continuing on from our previous video, I made a couple changes since our last video. The first one is to go through the package JSON and to upgrade all the packages. And I've got this nifty add-on here that tells me whether I'm on the latest or not, and it makes it really easy to upgrade packages if I need to upgrade packages. I added my own prettier RC file, and so we're going to update our files here in a second. And then I separated out the modules, controllers, and services into their own folders. This will help when creating a bigger application and being able to separate out your services and your controllers and your modules, just to make it easier for readability and order of your application, keeping things in order. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to upgrade our packages. So yarn install will upgrade all of our packages to the latest package based off of the package JSON. And then Nest provides a format, so we're going to do a yarn format since I changed the prettier RC file. And so now we've formatted all of our files, and we should be good to go now. So we're going to add GraphQL to our NestJS application. So on the NestJS documents, which is you can find at docs.nestjs.com, we can look at the GraphQL section here, and we'll just go to Quick Start. And again, you can continue to read all their documentation. It's very good. We're going to do this in TypeScript, so we're going to copy over these packages, and we're going to yarn and add these packages here. All right. So now we've added GraphQL, and we're going to do an Apollo server. So we're going to add that as well. And then Nest is going to go over an overview of the different ways to build your GraphQL. You can do it schema first, or you can do it code first. And we're going to get started with GraphQL TypeScript here. And so we're going to add this GraphQL model to our app module file. So this is done. So let's come back over here. We've got our app module here, and we're going to add this NestJS GraphQL module, and we'll add it right here. So we'll do a GraphQL module, and let's look at the documentation as to what we can do. So we're just going to do a for root. Oops, get that out of the way. There we go. But we're going to make some changes here as well. And here we go. Get that up so I can have that. Okay, so back over to the documentation. So there's a bunch of different options that you can add to your GraphQL setup in the imports. So we're going to do that now. We're going to look at the type paths. What we're going to do is we're going to add it here, and then I'm going to show you how to add it, how to add the type paths. So source is where all of our source files are. We're going to go through each directory, and we're going to look for a GraphQL file. We'll add those GraphQL files in a little bit. We're going to set the path for our GraphQL, which will just be GraphQL. That's the default. And then we can turn the playground on or off. So we're going to turn it on. These are all defaults, so I'm going to go ahead and remove those. And that's pretty much all you got to do to get it set up. So now, let's hop back over the documentation. We got the GraphQL. We'll do, let's see here, schema first. Here we go. All right, so schema first is what we're going to do. And we've added the type paths. And you've got definitions here, which I'm not going to worry about adding right now. All right, so we're going to add this nifty generation schema. And to do that, let's add a new file here, and we're going to call it generatetypings.ts. And in this generate typings, we're going to do a const definition factory equals new GraphQL. It's not going to find it. All right, so let's go ahead and import it first. We're going to import this from NestJS GraphQL, and what it is a GraphQL definitions factory. All right, we're also going to import as path from path. So now we can do our definitions factory here, and then in our definitions factory we're going to generate, and we're going to do the type paths again. This is very similar to what we did earlier. Oops, there we go. Source, all folders, and then GraphQL file, and we're going to set our path, path.join, and this is going to be where it outputs the file that's going to be generated. And we'll do source GraphQL schema.ts. So that's going to be the generated file, and we're going to output it as a class. All right, sweet. Good to go. So now we can generate our GraphQL files, and what we're going to do is add that to the package JSON. So we'll hop over here to package JSON, and we'll add a new file or a new script here, and it's going to be called generate typings, and we'll do ts node and then to the file that we added. So source generate typings. And then on a yarn start, we can do that first. We can do a yarn generate typings and then run the application. So let's just copy that over here, and here, and here, and then here as well. All right, so now we've got our generate typings script ready to go, and we've got it set up to use GraphQL in the NestJS application. So all we need now is GraphQL endpoints. So if you know anything about GraphQL, you know that there's going to be a resolver. So we're going to add a new folder here, and we're going to call it resolvers. And in resolvers, let's add a resolver. So in terms of my larger project, I'm going to create a let's see here, a bulletin resolver. So we're going to do bulletin.resolvers.ts. Okay. And then inside of this folder as well, we're going to add the bulletin.graphql. So now we can define our GraphQL schema here. And so we're going to add a query, because we want a query for a bulletin. All right, so we'll do get bulletins. We'll just do all the bulletins, okay? And what we want to do is get all the bulletins, and so it's going to return back a bulletins response. All right. So now we can define the type for bulletins response, and on that bulletin, let me pull up my schema here. I've got a Postgres database here, and I've got a bunch of tables, and I've got one table rather that's going to hold our bulletins. And so you can see here I've got an ID, a month, a year, a date, PDF, and an image. And those are going to be what we're going to add. So we've got ID, which will be an ID, it's required. We'll have a month, which is an int, which is also required, a year, which is another int, which is required, and then what else we got? We've got a date, which I'm going to turn into a string, which is also required, PDF, which is a string, also required, and then let's see here. We've got the image, which is a string. So this is a bulletin response. Type bulletins response is going to be bulletins, which is going to be like this, an array of bulletin responses. All right. I think that takes care of my GraphQL schema. So what we can do now is run our generation script. So we can do yarn generate typings. See if I can spell that right, typings. And what this should do is then take our GraphQL and turn it into a TypeScript file. So let's see what the error is. Unexpected name found, open parentheses. That's because I don't have anything here. So if you don't have any parameters into your query, you don't need the parentheses. Cool, so now that generated. So now we've got this automatically generated GraphQL schema. And here you can see our query, get bulletins, returns a bulletin response. And our bulletins response is an array of bulletin responses, and our ID, and so on and so forth. Everything is here. Let's go ahead and add that to the getignore file because I don't want to commit this. So we'll do source GraphQL schema.ts. You could commit it if you really wanted to. I don't because it's going to be generated whenever I start the server, whenever I build the server, anything like that, it's going to be generated. So, all right, so now let's go over to our resolvers. And here's where we're going to create our resolver. That's not the right resolver. Let's import that from NestJS GraphQL. There we go. And we'll name it bulletin. And we'll export a class, and it'll be called a bulletin resolvers. And then we're going to create a constructor here, which we're going to eventually add a service. We'll add the service in a little bit. So we'll do a query and public async, there we go, get bulletins. And inside of here, you would add your arguments if you have arguments. We don't, so we're going to return a promise of whatever we're going to, the type that we're going to return. And so here is where the TypeScript file comes in at. And so we're going to return a bulletins response. And you see now that it imported our GraphQL schema here. Also, I noticed that this is not the right query. There we go. Let's edit from GraphQL. We'll comment that out for now. So great. And now what we're going to do is return data. So here's where we're going to end up calling the service. We're going to do that a little bit later. Here we're going to import the service. I just want to get GraphQL up and running for you guys. And here what we can do is we can return a new bulletins response. Do this right. Response. So then response.bulletins equals an array, and there's going to be inside here, let's add an ID of let's say 1 and a month of 3 and a year. Oh, these are integers. Do that, and then a year of 2020. Let's see here. Date is, let's do March 29, 2020, and then the URL. Sorry, the PDF, which is a PDF URL. We'll change all this a little bit later. And then the last item is image, and then image URL. See if I can spell it right. Okay. And then return response. Sweet. So now we are returning that. Good. So now what? Well, we need to add that to our module, because NestJS isn't going to know about it until it's added to the app module and it's bootstrapped at the beginning of the app. So a resolver is not a controller, it is a provider. It's almost like a service. So we'll add the bulletin resolvers here, and you see it's imported automatically. And then now NestJS will know about it and can bootstrap it and start it. Cool. So let's see if this works. Over here, we'll do a yarn start. It's going to generate the typings every time you start. That way, if you ever make changes, it'll automatically be defined and built when you start the application. It also does that on build, and that's the nifty part about doing this. Great, so now it's up and running. So let's take a look. Let's go to localhost 3000. We're still getting our hello world that we got in the last video, but now we should be able to go to GraphQL, and we get our GraphQL playground. Amazing. And let's look at the docs. So you get your get bulletins, bulletins response, returns back an array of bulletin responses, and then you've got all that stuff on it. And you've got your schema here as well. So let's write our query. So let's do a query, get bulletins. No, we don't need that. And then we're going to do get bulletins, and we're going to get bulletins. And we're going to get the ID, and the month, and the year, and the date, and the PDF, and the image. Running it, and you see that now we are getting all the data back from our resolver. The amazing thing about GraphQL is, let's say I didn't actually want the ID, I can take that off, and I don't get the ID anymore. Great, so now you've set up GraphQL onto your Nest application, your Node.js server application. And there's a few things that we're going to make changes to in the next video. We're going to add the service. We're also going to look at another library to start connecting to our Postgres database. And it's all going to be great. So far what you've done is you've set up the NestJS application. You've got that up and running. And now you've added the GraphQL endpoint to it. And now you can make queries. You can add mutations. We're going to work on adding a bulletin. We're going to get the bulletins. We're going to get them from the database. And we're going to connect up to the database in the future videos. So thanks again for watching, guys. It's been great. And I hope that you continue on watching with us.